Hello and welcome. Hello, as people come into this webinar, you are in the right place. We're talking about PTSD and the military. Thank you for joining us. We'll just take a couple of minutes while more people come on. We've been having a fabulous conversation.
While we're waiting, do you want me to talk about my shark attack? I'm just throwing it out there.
Sure. Just in a few, just
okay,
over a couple
one sentence. This thing was tossing me around under the water, and time slowed down. I had the old life flashing before my eyes, and sharks have eyelids. And whenever they bite down, they close over. So this thing was biting into me, tossing me around, and it was looking at me and sort of like this. And
how was that again?
But the thing that I had going for me was I had a shark shield on, but it wasn't actually turned on. Dumb Tim hadn't turned it on. The on switch was inside this shark's mouth. And I'm about to drown, right? So I'm like, what's the point of keeping a finger? So I stuck my hand inside this shark's mouth, found this switch, flicked it on, and the thing let go. And that's why I'm here now.
Wow.
That is amazing. What is a shark suit?
A shark shield. It's an electrical device that creates a current that keeps the sharks away. But it works when you turn it on, apparently.
Yeah, you got to turn it on.
Okay. Well, that's a great introduction to one of our panel today, Tim Thomas. Let me introduce the panel. I'm Judith Richards. I have many pairs of glasses. I am the creator of the Richards Trauma Process, or TRTP. TRTP resolves PTSD, anxiety, depression, and trauma-related issues in just a few sessions. And I'd like to introduce one of my first students, Steve Gardiner. I met Steve in 2014, and Steve was still suffering from the results of serving in Rhodesia, in the Rhodesian army, in the SAS in the Bush Wars when Rhodesia became Zimbabwe. It was a horrific war, and Steve went on to do other things. He went on to become a crop scientist, a salvage diver. So Steve, is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
Oh, not really. I mean, had done a few things in my life: crop science, salvage diving, now a clinical hypnotherapist.
And on the teaching team of TRTP.
Teaching team of TRTP, senior mentor, and it's become who I am now. It's very much something that I do most of the time because of the incredible results that I get. Okay,
good. So we're going to be talking about diving. Let me introduce Tim Thomas. Tim is an extreme diver. Tim is a free diver. Tim served as a commando for how many years?
6 years.
6 years. And when he left the forces, it became massively apparent that he had undiagnosed PTSD. And Tim has done an awful lot of work in assisting other veterans through PTSD. He was foundational in set up of an organization, Mates for Mates, and he's now set up another organization, Demilitarized Zone, and you can catch him on YouTube, The Commando in Your Corner, CYC, The Commando in Your Corner. Now, if I ever wanted a commando in my corner, it would be Tim. Tim, would you like to add anything to that?
Well, firstly, Judith, really happy to be here. So glad that there's so many people active in the area of helping others. I think this is the highest calling, and that's why I'm so happy to be here and contribute my small piece of the picture.
Thanks, Tim. And I was saying to Steve that whenever I get together with Tim, I learn something, and I always take away quotable quotes. As we go along, if you have a question, just type it in and we'll try to answer everybody. If your question does not get answered today, because we'll try and stop right on 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock down south, your question will be answered in the next 24 hours or so. I'll get on to you and talk to you. So we are going to talk about the military and PTSD. I know that both of these wonderful men have gone through times of extreme suffering in the grips of PTSD. Tim, you explained it just so beautifully when we did another interview, when you were talking about it's like when you're in a contact.
Oh, yes. Well, the first thing you need to do in a contact is find out where the bullets are coming from. But this was pain coming in a direction you just didn't know. So what you ended up doing was retreating and retreating and retreating. You're losing connections to your physical abilities, your mental abilities, and then that flowed over into your connections with, friends and family. And the pain just kept coming, and there was no target indication. It was like a dog trying to run away from fireworks. You just keep running.
Yeah, that's a great. It's a great way of putting it. Steve, is that how it was for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking that's a brilliant way to put it, because you're right. When you don't know where the target is, you don't know where to direct your return fire to, should we say. So yes, it's total confusion. Where is it all coming from? Let's just keep going back until we try and sort it out, and it just never gets sorted out.
Yeah. And you said, Tim, that in some of the work that we did, that it was like friendly skies.
Well,
would you like to explain what that means?
When you're in the sort of grips of something, and it's really sort of, it's affecting you in ways you can't put words to, but you're walking around and it's like the sky is black, even when it's clear blue. And everything seems very unfriendly, unsure, unsafe. And then after doing TRTP with you, and how I got to that, I'll touch on a bit later, but it was like the skies cleared up, the oceans were friendlier. And the ocean sort of held you, it was, it's hard to put words around that, but there was a distinctive shift, and you say these things and it sort of, you move into this place and then you sort of get used to good weather, so to speak. And and then if bad days come, they're very apparent, because before, it was just you, stormy skies, and your pain threshold, and you prided yourself on how much, pain you could deal with, because got through another day, because it was just you and your pain.
Yeah. And in terms of those friendly skies, you were talking about when you're in a contact, if the enemy owns the sky.
Oh, yeah. So aerial superiority is what we call it. It's a very handy thing to have in a contact, as Steve would know. And
having the high ground.
Yeah, having the high ground, having that sort of support up high, it enables you to, keep and hold ground that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to.
Right. Friendly skies. You're safe.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And when I met Steve, who was still rather in the throes of PTSD decades after his experience as a young man in the Bush Wars, Steve went on, as we said, to become a crop scientist. So being the scientist and being the ex-SAS smartass that he was,
Thanks.
he left my rooms and went directly to test what we had done, to test the work that we had done. So he went straight to the cinema nearby and bought a ticket and sat through Saving Private Ryan, which had just been released, and it was supposed to be the most realistic war film ever. And he was waiting to be triggered. And tell us about that, Steve.
Well, what you didn't say is that before I went to see you, I went to see Private Ryan then. And halfway through, I was a mess. I was total basket case. had to leave.
I didn't know this part of the story.
Yeah, so I had to leave, and because this is how private Ryan's become my sort of baseline. But it triggered off all sorts of things. And at that stage too, whenever I saw helicopters, it sent a shiver down my spine because I was wondering what casualties were coming in. So after doing this, I went and watched it, and again, halfway through it, I'm thinking this is a really good movie. It's pretty graphic, but it's all good. And I walked out of that movie and I thought, oh, rubbish. There's no ways it could happen like this.
Because you weren't triggered. You were waiting to be triggered and no triggers.
I walked out of there. I was fine, and so I went back and watched it a second time just to make sure. You have to make sure.
Yes.
And it was all good. And, 4 years later, I can remember they showed Private Ryan, Saving Private Ryan on TV, and I watched it again. Again, no problems. And just recently, I watched this Australian movie, Danger Close, on the Longtan Battles. Bloody good movie, and typical Australian movie, very, pretty good for it. Slept like a baby.
Yeah, no nightmares.
No, and helicopters are helicopters. They fly overhead and they're helicopters.
Yes, I remember when we were out getting takeaway during one of our courses, we were in the middle of this road, and coming straight down the road, right at us, was this helicopter flying low. And Steve was out in the middle of the road going, "It's only a helicopter." Yes. So, and I'm sure Joss is pleased that the rage has gone.
Yeah, I mean, look, I still get angry, but everybody gets angry.
A little bit cross.
Yeah, it's just not as intense or as long-lasting. Because it's little things. I don't know about you, Tim, but it was the little things that flicked off switches and just got me going. Sometimes it didn't even have to be a word. I can remember when we were in Cambodia, I pulled into a little museum which is run by an ex-Viet Cong, and they've been lifting landmines, and I saw a grenade called a Pom Z, which the terrorists used to use for booby traps and things like that. And that just triggered me off. I had to get out.
Yeah.
Just something like that. Just came out of nowhere.
Mm. Yeah. And so what was your lived experience like, Tim, with living with PTSD?
Well, like I said, it was a slow and steady disconnection between my own physical abilities, mental abilities, and then that overflowed into the connections I had with friends, with family, and the problem was I could do I could still work per se. I could still tell myself that I can do something and people still value me for it. And as a bloke, we tend to have, these parts of our life. As long as we do one part well, that other people value us for, then we can sort of say, well, look at that wall in the house. That's holding up the roof, whereas everything else can be crumbling down. But we'll just sort of keep redirecting to our show wall of something that we can physically do and other people value us for. So I was running my own business, and I didn't see, because it wasn't really on my radar, that all my family relationships were about to be lost.
As happens, isn't it?
Mm.
And it, as you say, it's a slow creep.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually you find many people find themselves very isolated and in huge pain. Joss has just said here, Jocelyn Gardiner is Steve's wife, just for people who are reading the chat. Joss said, when I first met Steve, we came to Brisbane on holiday. We were in Ann Street, and as we walked along, a car backfired. Steve hit the ground, and I thought, my first experience of many such events. That is very typical of what goes on.
Yeah, what I've noticed, supporting what Tim said, as people get older, it tends to rev up more, and it tends to take up more and more space, more and more ground.
And I'll talk about the physiology of that for those who are not aware. That what happens with PTSD is the recalibration switch turns off. So for a normal person, we go along, we have a stressful event, we release stress hormones, adrenaline, etc. The event passes, and we naturally, just through normal homeostasis, our system just by itself comes back to calm. We don't have to go and meditate for 5 days or anything. It just brings itself back to that normal state. We have a life-threatening experience. We go up to fight, flight, freeze, but the event passes and the whole being, our body, just does its thing without us thinking about it and comes back to that normal state. But what happens with PTSD is we stay up here in the fight, flight, freeze zone with the amygdala firing, with fight, flight, freeze firing. The emergency services in the brain, going nearly all the time. And just like a muscle that we use a lot and gets bigger and stronger, better at what it does, that alarm system gets bigger and stronger, and it takes less and less and less for it to trigger. And
it's kind of like everything is like a nervous anaphylactic shock.
That's a really good way of putting it, Tim.
Yeah, and we didn't have an EpiPen. It was you don't because you're in that such a state, you overreact to everything, and it's like you can't breathe, just like anaphylaxis.
I'm writing that down. It's another Tim quote: nervous anaphylactic shock. That is exactly what it's like.
Or should I say nervous anaphylaxis?
Anaphylaxis.
Anaphylaxis of the nervous system. I'm sure you could tool that up.
Anaphylaxis of the nervous system. I am liking that, because that's exactly how it is, isn't it?
Yeah, everything gets into overwhelm.
Like Steve said it before, a small thing, it doesn't mean anything to anybody, but all of a sudden it is just tilted your axis, and your day has now changed to the day that was tipped into hell from that thing that
moment
no one else saw.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to give people here a little bit of more background about my model of how all this works. So we have a really distressing event, a traumatic event, and we, the alarm bells go off, and we release adrenaline, cortisol, etc. And what happens when someone gets stuck in that fight, flight, freeze, gets stuck in trauma, gets stuck in PTSD, is the part of the brain, the hippocampus, that's responsible for taking a memory and putting it in long-term memory, putting it in the warehouse of memory and shutting the door and saying, well, that's over. Instead of that happening, that part of the brain shuts down, and the memory is stored as a videotape loop in the unconscious. And of course, the unconscious runs every chemical reaction, every electrical response in the body. It runs all our nervous system. And what happens, as Tim said, it can be some little thing. It doesn't necessarily need to be something obvious, like that grenade thing, that exploding device you saw, Steve, in Cambodia. It can be some little thing.
Oh, yeah.
And what happens is that videotape loop comes on, and the body responds as if that event that's stored in the unconscious is happening now. Consciously, we're not aware of it unless we're in extreme PTSD, where it breaks through, this video tape loop breaks through into the conscious mind, and we experience it as a flashback. A flashback is not a memory. It's not images. It's a relived experience as if it's happening now. So Steve heard the car backfire. Bang, hit the ground. Immediately, he was back in the war and he had to hit the dirt. What we do as TRTP is we turn off these videotape loops so that the symptoms just disappear. So the whole system goes back into that self-regulation, because we still have, stressful events, but that self-regulation kicks in. But why it gets worse as we get older is, the continuing more and more isolation. Our world gets smaller and smaller, but that alarm system gets better and better, faster and faster at creating that fight, flight, freeze response. And we've just lost Tim. Are you there, Tim?
Judith, can you hear me?
Can hear you.
Okay, well, my screen just went blank. I don't know.
Okay.
I literally wasn't touching anything.
No, it's okay. That's okay. Something's happened at your end in terms of the internet. There we go.
Sorry, I didn't mean to steal your thunder there, Judith.
No, that's fine, Tim. No problem at all. So if anyone has any questions, just type them in as we go along. One of the reasons I understand what Steve and Tim are talking about is I was never in the SAS or a commando, funnily enough. I know, I look impressive, but I never was. So I had my own life of ridiculous trauma and ended up in extreme PTSD and split personality and living in hallucinations after being tortured. I worked my way up through violent lunatics until I found myself with a homicidal psychopath who was into torture and he was into cutting. So over a period of 9 years, I experienced a lot of torture, which ended up in me losing a lot of my insides. But I'm fine now. Melinda is saying, is it EMDR? No, Melinda, it's nothing to do with EMDR. Meredith, helpful explanations. You're welcome, Meredith. In terms of your experience, Steve, after doing TRTP, just a second, Judith Ellis. Sorry, I missed the start of the webinar. I presume both Tim and Steve have undertaken TRTP, is that correct? Yes. Both Steve and Tim are ex-Special Forces, Steve in Zimbabwe, Tim for the Australian Defence Force in Afghanistan and East Timor. Tracy Griffiths, have you seen full recovery of complex PTSD from most patients that have undertaken TRTP from situations that aren't from a life-threatening event or once-off distressing event? We're not talking about once-off, Tracy. So I'm just going to answer Tracy, guys. So
yeah, sure.
Just hang in there. The way I view it is it's never a once-off trauma. It's never, ever, ever. They've done big studies with twins who go to war and they'll both experience similar things, but one twin will have PTSD and one won't. And how it works is, we've got these videotape loops in the unconscious, all these distressing events, and the distress builds up like the pressure in a balloon. And then if you've got a pretty full balloon and you go to war and you go through horrific stuff, something's got to give. The pressure in the balloon has to blow through somewhere. So it blows up, the balloon pops out into PTSD. For many people, it also includes things like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, lupus. And so in terms of complex PTSD, it's the same thing. It's never, ever one distressing event, ever, ever, ever. It's all those videotape loops. When I was 3, when that happened, when I was 7, when that happened, when I was 4, when I was 15, when I was 23, when I was, the big one came when I was 26, and then there's all the others. So what we do with TRTP is simply take the pressure out of the balloon by turning off the biggest videotape loops, and just automatically the lesser ones turn off. So it's got nothing to do with EMDR. And Julia Sims, sorry to hear of your trauma. No, it's okay, Julia, because out of that came TRTP, because I had to find a way. Tracy Griffiths, I've had good results from the process, but just interested in hearing if it's the norm. Thanks. Yes, it's 90+% of people who go through TRTP who start off at extremely severe. At the end of the DASS scale, depression, anxiety, stress scale, go to normal by the end of the session. That's normal. So getting back to you, Steve, what were some of the shifts that in your perception in what was going on for you?
I think the biggest thing for me was I felt safe. I just felt safe. I felt that I wasn't under attack all the time. And my anger was nowhere near what it was like. I think that I was fairly normal, and angry was a fairly normal part of who I was. Almost proud of it, actually, funny enough. But certainly the anger was really reduced. But I think the biggest thing for me was I felt safe, and continue was looking at things that would trigger me off and say, but that's not happening. So it was like wonderment too,
That your previous triggers weren't triggering you.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's really interesting.
So
my dad set
safe
up.
and secure.
Yeah. My dad set up bomb disposal in the Second World War in New Guinea. And the bomb disposal guys used to talk about pulling the teeth on a bomb, rendering it harmless. They'd take out the detonator, and the bomb had no teeth to bite anybody anymore. So they'd talk about pulling the teeth on a bomb. It sounds painful, but it's not when you do it on a person. So I talk about, we take the detonator out. There's nothing to trigger anymore. Our past doesn't have teeth. It can't sneak up and bite us. It can't hurt anymore. Tim, do you have anything to add on that?
I did, but then you got me on the bombs with teeth.
Sorry, Tim.
Just give me a second. Come back to me in a bit.
Okay.
I did have something to say, but I was bombs, teeth, and then it left me.
No,
Sorry.
that's okay. No, my mother was very assured by my father when he came home on leave one time and put a big bomb under the bed and told her, no, it's fine. I've pulled the teeth. And my mother woke up in the middle of the night and heard the clock ticking and was paralyzed in fear. She couldn't even wake up her young husband, and she was just in freeze.
Okay, the biggest thing for me now that I think about this is when you go from one level of normal, okay, you're used to having levels up so high, and you get a new level of normal, a few things happen. One, you sort of move forward, and because it seems a new day seems normal, things that you used to do, it's almost like they never happened, but it becomes acutely aware, should things start going bad, because before bad was normal, now bad is something that needs to be addressed and dealt with, because I might be tough enough to handle my pain, and it becomes a bit of a badge of honor, but that doesn't stop it affecting people I care about.
Let's just talk about that for a second, Tim. How this impacts the people who are closest to us. I always found that symptom of PTSD, that rage that goes from 0 to 1,000 miles an hour in a nanosecond, is the most difficult symptom to deal with as the sufferer, but as somebody who's in our intimate sphere.
Mm-hmm. It completely destroys any social credit you've got. When you feel safe around somebody, social credit, you've done the effort, you've got that banked. When you get angry, boom, that just evaporates, and all of a sudden you're a stranger in their house.
Yes.
And I guess what you were saying before about the thing is, it's military and PTSD. It doesn't help the way the military culture works, because if I admit that I'm weak, if I ask for help, that means I'm weak. And if I'm weak, I'll let the team down, and I'll die before I let the team down. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there is this. I mean, that's normal sort of blokey behavior, I suppose, but it's sort of taken to a real extreme in the military. And because you're trained not to be the weak one, you start seeing the ability to get healing as weakness, because what guys end up doing is, they've had to live with this pain for so long, and they're tough enough to do it. And if someone else gets healing for a problem that they've had, then that's a bit of an insult. Geez, I didn't just tolerate this pain for 10 years for nothing. That's an insult to my carrying this thing for 10 years. And then they sort of, completely denigrate that idea of that their pain could be healed. You know what I mean? So there's a big cultural shift. Like I wouldn't have, and it's important this is raised, because I would never have, if someone said to me, 3 steps, it's done, bull dust, and the problem is there's so many people out there going, oh, we can do this, we can do that. And you get your trust betrayed so many times. Okay. The only reason I came to you was because it came from a trusted source. So the hardest thing about getting this out there isn't the effectiveness of it. It's that trust you can feel with that other person who introduces you to it. And then you can slide into that, because I could have done those sessions, but if my guard was up, all of a sudden
nothing would have happened.
Nothing would have happened. So this is how I ran my veterans program so successfully, because I knew that the most important thing about the program wasn't the actual program, it was the 3 days before it. Because 72 hours beforehand, their mind is going through the idea of, oh, something different's about to happen, you know, and a part of them goes, oh, if something good happens from this, then something will have to change. And negativity screams the loudest just before it dies. You know what I mean? And so the negative parts of you will say, okay, you want to do it, we'll let you, but we'll make sure you're completely fatigued by the time you get there and you won't get any benefit from it. So the way to bust through that, I found, was through trust and connection. So 3 days beforehand, I'd just call up and I'd just talk nothing. You know what I mean? Just engage, blah, 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 blah. And then, you know, send them a text the next day, blah, make a joke about, or just some form of interaction. And then the night before, because it can be a long bloody night for a lot of military people, you know, the night before, touch base, see you in the morning, all good, get a good night's sleep. It's going to be a big day tomorrow. And yeah, a lot of the veteran programs we ran had upwards of 90% cancellation because this wasn't being addressed. Okay. So my success was due to understanding what happened before the positive changes happened, because of understanding the internal turmoil, the unconscious part of a person, which I find TRTP addresses so well. And no one else is really addressing. And people say, yeah, we can do this. And then the problem with veterans is they're so fatigued, they don't have the energy for placebo effects. This stuff's got to work, you know, and it's got to work when everything's not working. You're not in a good state of mind. It's got to work because it either works or it doesn't. And a lot of psychologists don't say they do this, say they do that, but they don't take on veteran clients because they realize that, hey, these guys are a bit too hot to handle. You know, my stuff is going to not stand up. And more often than not, it doesn't. I'm telling you now, not all healers are born equal.
Oh, yep, we know about that.
And you know what? Sorry. So
as all plumbers are not born equal, as all soldiers are not born equal. But yeah, that's a fabulous point you're bringing up there, Tim. Thank you for that insight, Steve.
So what you're also coming up as, which is Tim's alluding to here too, is the culture, being the tribe. This is, you're safe with these guys because we're all along the same lines. And so if you're going to go to someone to treat you and you don't think that they're part of this, they don't understand this culture, you're going to go nowhere. They're very distrustful. And they have every means to be too. Because if you don't understand what I am, where I'm coming from, you get a normal psychiatrist who's dealt with veterans, forget it ain't going to work.
And it's not necessarily the person in front of them. It could be the 100 people that we met beforehand that were complete apathetic. And I could really put my soldier's teeth in right now. But the amount of incompetent, apathetic people out there that call them healers, you know, it's the closest I've ever gone to prison was when I finally stuck my hand up for help, because I'd finally hit rock bottom, and I wasn't just met with incompetence. Incompetence I could handle. I was met with apathy. I saw myself doing things that I'm like, yeah, I'm probably going to go to prison if this goes the way I think it could. But what it ended up doing was giving me a real passion to help others in that same situation. So what I started picturing was, you know, thousands of people left and right of me willing me on, because if I could find a way forward for me, then I could find a way forward for them. And I wager, Judith, that was something similar, you know, when you were pulling yourself out of that situation. The worst thing pain does to us. In fact, I'm doing a
fabulous
three-part series on the secrets of pain right now. Stage 1 is out. Part 2 is about to be released, but it talks about the secrets of pain, and pain's ultimate goal is, and it doesn't matter whether it's emotional or physical, it'll get to a certain point where it stops just being pain and starts becoming isolation. And that's something no human can handle. And in that isolation, in that disconnection, the ultimate disconnect, you know, you disconnect from your body, your mind, your people around you. And, you know, I have to sort of bring up this awkward subject because it really touches on a lot of ADF people. In that state of disconnect, you have people saying to themselves, okay, what do I know right now? I know I'm in pain. I know I'm causing pain to others. I look into my future right now and I can't see anything changing, because nothing changes if nothing changes. And then all of a sudden, the idea of suicide comes up and says, hey, this is an enlightened idea. I'll stop the pain to me. I'll stop the pain to others. I'm doing those guys a favor.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
one thing I say in part 2 about to be released is, suicide is a pain multiplier. It multiplies the pain to you and everyone you know. So don't think it's going to stop the pain. But I'm just sort of fleshing that out, because this is sort of the removing the pain allows for reconnection. So I like the idea of, it's not just the injury, there's a reconnection there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Beyond the pains and symptoms, you've got to look at the disconnect.
Yes, because that disconnect can be quite complete. So if people haven't experienced that rage of PTSD, does anybody here, as in the attendees, have you experienced PTSD? If you haven't experienced full-blown PTSD, and it's a spectrum from mild to off the charts, just imagine, I'll just take you into a scenario. So just imagine that, okay, it's a normal family Saturday afternoon, and it's an open plan lounge kitchen arrangement. And there's mum's doing her thing, dad's doing his thing, and the 2 kids are doing their thing, the dog and the cat are doing their thing. And someone says something that is quite innocuous about nothing. And all of a sudden, bang, dad, 0 to 1,000. It's not like the normal slow burn of resentment or irritability. It's something quite different. It's like throwing a lit match at petrol, and it's just bang. And it's like watching a slow moving train wreck. And I used to, it's like a lot of people dissociate at that point and just watch on. And then come to when the kids are under the dining table, mum's between dad and the kids in protective mode, the dog and the cat are under the lounge, and dad comes to and realizes that everyone's terrified of him. The people he loves, the people who he needs desperately to be there, are terrified of him. And the guilt and the shame that sets in, and the thought of suicide, the most loving, responsible thing I can do is remove myself, because I'm a stranger in this house, and those I love are terrified of me. Now switch the roles. It's mum and dad's between mum and the kids, because it can be women. It's not just a men's thing. And there was a comment here from, just a second, I'll go back up here because I just saw it before. There's a comment here from Greg. Greg, thanks for your comment. Does PTSD have a spectrum? As a police officer, I felt difficulty on leaving to take up study and a different career path after 5 years of service, but nothing to compare with being in a war zone. No, Greg, but it's not just the military who get PTSD. It's emergency services personnel. It's cops like yourself. It's people who've been through domestic violence, people who've been through childhood abuse of various kinds, including neglect. It's people who've been
get lost in the high ticket items, and I hear it all the time. Like, I got deployed to a war zone, and then people say, "Oh, I've done nothing compared to that." But the nervous system doesn't know that. Okay, your nervous system is structured to see if that's a threat, that's a threat, and if that's the biggest threat I know, that's the biggest threat I know. Okay, and if you've had the only thing that, say, wartime services, like Judith said earlier, you've got like one event, you don't get a chance to rest, recover, and dial down, and then you just have these sort of banking events. So don't think for a second that your nervous system knows the difference, because it reacts the way it reacts, and we can't always control it.
And
the same amount of cortisol that goes through their system was going through my system, and it's just they've been exposed to different things. So looking at a chemical level, it can be just on par. So don't downplay yourself, and to the point where you don't think you deserve as much resources for healing as anyone else, if you follow me.
Yeah.
It's non-exclusive to military. And in fact, when you have a look at it, one of the biggest areas of PTSD is domestic violence.
Some homes are war zones. Just saying, and can I just say that a lot of perpetrators of domestic violence have PTSD. I used to specialize in my clients when I was in full-time practice. I specialized in violent, angry men brought against their will. The kind of guys who've been under house arrest for a couple of days by the men in their family because they're hell-bent on going and killing the ex, the new boyfriend and the children. And they would come in, they didn't want to be there. They wanted to go and kill people. And in a couple of hours, they'd be safe and everybody in their world would be safe. Those guys, some of them had the most horrific childhoods, very violent, dreadful thing. And all you have to do, hurt people. And often we're really hurt and we don't want to be hurting people.
But we still need energy. And there's two ways to get energy. You can either take it from others or you can learn how to invest it yourself. And if you haven't been shown how to invest, you go to what you know, and that is take. And your energy levels drop to a certain point where you become that person that's drowning and just clawing at people. And you can't help because you need energy to get by, and you're out of balance. And you've been out of balance for so long, and then we end up compounding things by taking substances which help us get by in a state of imbalance. But then when we're low, we tend to claw at things outside of us, which could be the people closest to us.
Like a drowning person does. Thank you for that. Judith Ellis says, I'm a GP and RAF reserve. Good on you, Judith. We've got quite a number of, we have several GPs amongst our graduate community. And attended a PTSD conference in Melbourne last year. The emphasis was on evidence-based treatments. Can we get TRTP approved for use by psychologists within the ADF? It's a good question, Judith, and we're working on it. And the answer is yes.
Watch this space.
Watch this space. Within our graduate community, we have people like Dr. Jennifer Rice, who taught psychology research design at Melbourne University for 15 years. Another GP, Dr. Katrina Barson, who's very involved in Melbourne University. So we have within our graduate community academics who are taking this, and we are going along that research. I've been teaching this for, Steve was in my first group, 2014, July 2014. We've been teaching this, and research takes a while. So watch this space. Yes, we have an audit done on 715 clients who've been through TRTP and their DAS scores. We've got lots of stuff coming, so watch this space. Thank you, Tim, for that. There are a few other comments here. Trina, no one can advise me. I would suggest that you go to the practitioner directory on the richardstraumaprocess.com, and find a practitioner on there. And this is just as effective online as it is face-to-face. It's every bit as effective on something like this as it is face-to-face. Have you dealt with kidnapping, Trina? Sorry. Yes, we've done quite a lot of kidnapping. Well, I have. I've had quite a lot of victims of kidnapping, no problem. It doesn't matter what the trauma is. If we take away the word trauma and say distressing events or periods of extreme stress, we get more of an idea, because when we think of trauma, we do think of defense personnel. We do think of war. But like I said, some homes are war zones. Yes, Jan, we need to deal with that trust issue really well. And as part of the training with TRTP, the underpinnings of it is that, I've got you and you're safe, and that experience between the practitioner and the client of that safety. Meredith got shot in the shoulder whilst riding her horse at age 14. Yes. I spent a lot of years not letting on, as it felt like a further threat to be seen as weak. Yes. It's like we are mammals. Hello? We forget that we are mammals. And your dog can be really, really sick, and you take it to the vet where there are other dogs, and it'll pretend to be completely well because it can't be seen as weak. We can't be seen as vulnerable. We forget so often that we are mammals and we are pack animals, and we need a pack. We cannot live in that isolation that you were talking about, Tim.
Well, we need it even more because as uniquely humans, we can detect threats that aren't even in the room, aren't even visible. So a dog will be lying quite happily on the floor because he's fully aware of what's going on around him. There's no threat. He can relax. But we can be in a room, but we can think up stuff that's not even there. We can feed into the part of us that has been fed for however many years that there are threats everywhere. And I kind of think, your mind's like a garden. Whatever you water grows. And if for years you've been watering the weeds, well, guess what's going to grow? Guess what's going to say, I demand your resources, to the point where I had the weeds in my head making me see things that weren't even there, because that was their way of getting fed, because I was seeing stuff. They were making me see stuff, and then I'd focus on that, and then they go, great, we've got him.
Yeah,
and the more you do it, the easier it becomes to do that.
Yes. Yeah.
Becomes who you are.
And that's the thing. We were talking at the beginning of this call about, like that ability to tolerate such extreme pain becomes a badge of honor for some people.
Oh yeah, and that's the culture within the military. Look at that guy. He's could carry 2 packs, done 5 deployments, and wow, isn't he awesome? And it becomes something to look up to. So
the guy who has abs on their jaw.
Yeah, but what no one sees is the state of disconnect that person's living with, the state of disconnect that is inside of him, the state of disconnect that is inside of his close personal relationships.
Yes.
Because you can get to your goal, if you're prepared to sacrifice enough, you'll get to your goal, but they don't tell you you'll become a shell of a person.
Thank you for that, Tim. You can get to your goal and give it your all and get there, but you will arrive as a wraith, a shell of a person.
And I'm not saying there isn't a time to muscle up and get the job done, but I think ideally it should be about a season, you know what I mean? Just like there's more daylight sometimes of the year and less light, you're supposed to work more and rest less, but us humans tend to ignore all natural prompting and just keep that, well, this is my work rate, no one's going to tell me otherwise.
Yes, no organism on the planet is on full work every second of the day. And I loved your Anzac Day address, Tim, where you said about after war, there must be healing. It's the most moving Anzac address I've ever seen. So for those, somebody back here said, where can I see the pain videos that Tim has done? If you go to YouTube, could you tell us where to go, Tim?
I'll just, there's the link.
Thank you.
I can give you the link to the Anzac Day address too, if you choose.
Yes, or maybe get people to go to your channel to subscribe so they get these things.
Oh, look, I've started this channel. It'd mean a lot to me if you guys did subscribe. I'll stick a few links up there now, and you can make your mind up if it's something worthwhile for you.
Yes, and don't go there just yet.
No, please
don't leave the webinar just yet. Yeah. But the name of your channel, Tim?
Commando in Your Corner.
Okay, so if you just go to YouTube and type into the search Commando in Your Corner, there is so much good stuff there, including the shark attack, when the shark attacked Tim, that some people heard about at the beginning of the call. And do yourself a favor and watch the Anzac one, the Anzac address. In fact, Tim's been invited. Are you going to Canberra for next year?
Well, that went across Brendan Nelson's desk. Well, I say this in the video, but afterwards we had Dame Quentin Bryce in the audience, and she came up to me and says, Tim, that was the best speech I've ever heard. And I thought my ears were playing tricks on me, because that woman would have heard thousands of speeches. And I'm like, no, I must have heard that, you know. And then later on, people were coming up and saying, did you hear what Dame Quinton's saying about this? And then I see her at another fundraiser, because I'm also the veteran ambassador for the Gallipoli Medical Research Foundation. It's an organisation that does research into a lot of different things with veterans and the wider community. But I met her again, and she said, Tim, I just want to say again, best speech I've ever heard. And my granddaughter sent me an email using your words, and it made sense to me in the way that when I was writing that thing, I felt something so much more powerful coming through me. You know, it was like my chest was on fire and there was lightning coming out of my hands as I was writing.
Yay!
Like, there is something going on here, you know. And you know, you don't know what happens outside your own skin, because you do what you do, and then what people take from that you don't always see. But you know, I believe that, you know, I believe in the power of the spoken word, and if you come from a really clean, sincere space, people pick up on that, and then they can take it and own it, and run with it.
Yeah.
You know?
So do yourself a favor, go to Tim's Commando in Your Corner channel and watch the Anzac address that he did at the Gallipoli Foundation this year. And someone else was saying something here, get to your goal and you lose your shell in a core of true self revealed. Is that a right depiction? No, Julia. It's get to your goal and you lose you just arrive as a shell. There's nothing inside you. It is all lost. It is all gone. It is spent.
If you're getting to it in a state of disconnection.
If you're getting, yeah. Okay.
So you're sacrificing everything to get to that goal. If you're ignoring the things that are being taken from you, you know, you've got mental and physical abilities. Those things will slowly get taken from you. And if you keep pursuing forward to your goal, whatever that is, and you're noticing that all of a sudden you've lost the ability to enjoy yourself, you've lost the ability to have a good night's sleep, you've lost the ability to, for me, talk to my wife without drinking 12 beers, you know.
Yeah. So thank you for that. You're white-anted. Yes, Meredith, you're white-anted. Exactly. So that someone just said, are there further webinars? Yes. If you go to our YouTube channel, TRTP, the Richards Trauma Process channel, there's lots of previous webinars on the connection of trauma and pain, trauma and weight. There's lots and lots of information there on how TRTP works, the uncommon knowledge that keeps anxiety locked in, the difference between normal anger and PTSD, rage. So go and have a look there. There were some before the call who asked me to talk about the training. If you're a practitioner, a mental health or health practitioner, and you're interested in having the clients who sit in front of you, if you're interested in taking them by the hand and leading them to complete healing in just a few sessions, using a process that's safe and effective and is long lasting. I've followed some of my angry, violent men who were brought against their will for 7 years, and they continue to get better and better and better. If it interests you to have an extraordinary impact on healing the pain of the people who sit in front of you, come and join us. There is a tsunami. People have heard me say this before, but there is a tsunami of pain out there, and it's just starting to break upon us. If you look at the work of epigenetics and how trauma is passed down from generation to generation, and look at the last 120 years and what's gone on this planet, and that is like a snowball. And what we're doing isn't working, people. Don't know if you've noticed, but the highest cause of death in 14 to 44-year-olds in Australia is suicide. There are children as young as 7 who are suiciding. I mean, what the? So many military, so many defense personnel are killed, not in battle, but they're killed because of the wounds that they carry within their very soul. And they commit suicide at an alarming, dreadful rate.
Just to back that up, Judith, we've lost about 40, a bit over 40 to casualties in Afghanistan, but since early 2000, we've lost nearly 10 times that amount to suicide.
Jeez.
In Australia.
All those young blokes. Jeez.
And that'll continue through the generations. So it won't be just the young blokes. As they get older, it'll keep continuing as well.
And it's interesting that it's dreadful. It's not interesting. It's horrible that Vietnam veterans, the suicide rate amongst their offspring, their children, is much higher than the suicide rate of the veterans themselves. So it gets passed down. And what we're doing with cognitive behavioral therapy, etc., is not working. I don't know if you've noticed, but it doesn't work because it's cognitive. Change the thoughts in order to change the behavior, and change the thoughts by intense concentration, intense discipline, and intense motivation. What TRTP does is ask about therapy. It doesn't do the change the thought to change the emotion to change the behavior. We change the person's experience of who they are, which naturally changes the emotion, and naturally, without any effort, changes the thoughts. TRTP is the spearhead of a revolution that will change mental health. Our end point is to change how mental health is done on this planet, because we need something that actually works. PTSD conferences around the country. There was one recently here on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. I didn't attend. Why? Because it was all about having a conversation about managing pain, managing PTSD, managing the symptoms. I mean, that's great. Have the conversation, manage the pain. But why don't we just fix the bastard? I'm just saying. Just because it can be. I had a GP ring me recently, one of my graduates, who said, hurry up. I said, hurry up, watch. I've just done 2 days of professional development for doctors being told that there is no cure for PTSD. Will you hurry up? There are people dying. Did you know that in some countries, people are being euthanized for therapy-resistant PTSD? Did you know that?
Jeez.
Belgium, Holland? We have to do something, and we have to do it now. We are at a tipping point in this planet on so many levels. So if something within you compels you to find out about what we're doing, to find out about this process, if you're compelled to assist your clients and really help them, which will impact their families, their communities, and of course it goes out and out. Go to the richardstraumaprocess.com. Click on every page. There's a click link that says make a Q&A 20-minute free appointment. Let's make it a time. You make a time on a calendar and we have a conversation. While you're there, go and look at what is TRTP. Go and check out the videos on the TRTP YouTube channel. Go to YouTube, watch Tim's stuff on pain. It's fabulous. If you're interested, just type in interested and I'll be in touch with you. Interested in the training. Thank you. Yes, Judith, you've booked for the upcoming half-day session. Yes, I'm about to do a workshop tour across universities across Australia in Perth, Adelaide, Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane from the 2nd of November. So come and learn the first steps of TRTP and be more effective in whatever modality that you are using. Thank you for joining us. I'd love to really thank you, Tim, for spending the time here with us. Thank you, Mr. Gardiner. You're frozen in space and time there with your internet connection, our fourth world communications in Australia. Thank you for attending. Let's do something to change the planet just because we can, by changing one person's life at a time. Thank you very much. Thanks for investing your time, your energy, and do go to the website and make an appointment if this draws you. Join us and let's change people's lives. Let's change the planet just because we can. Thank you very much. And good afternoon, good evening. Thanks so much, Tim. Thanks, Steve.
See ya.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. And the equine therapy, stay tuned.
Oh yeah,
Tim,
yeah.
we'll have to have another
Yeah,
conversation.
that's another thing altogether because
We'll have to.
Good.
We'll
No
have to have a. I will do an interview with Tim about that, a quick interview, and I'll put it up on the YouTube channel about horses. It'll be a short interview. Tim, I'll give you a call about when we can do that.
No worries.
Tim's
Okay.
off to walk the Great Ocean Road. They've they've raised what, 200 and.
Well, our goal was 70K, but now we just clocked over 230K. Some very generous
Just raised
people out there. Yeah.
$230,000. Thanks. That's great, Tim. Go you, and have a great walk.
Thank you.
Thank
If you
you.
follow the channel, I'll be putting live updates as I go along.
Oh, excellent. So subscribe to
Tomato in your corner,
Yeah.
and lots of fun stuff there. All right.
Yeah. And while you're on YouTube, go and subscribe to TRTP, the Richards Trauma Process, and you'll get notified when there's something up there. There's new stuff going up there all the time. Thanks. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Tim.
Okay.
And
No
good
worries.
night, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.